So I'm creating a project, okay. A simple registration form. Consider the requirement is I want to get student data. A registration form I want. A plain web application. We can convert that into microservice also. A microservice can have web also. Its own front end also it can have along with backend service. Okay. Let me create student SMS student management system web. Next, adding web jars for web dependency, Spring Data JPA depends on the server, MySQL or Oracle you can add. Actuator if you want to monitor application health and all. If you want to do automatic restarts and all dev tools. If you want to use getters and setters with Lombok annotations. And as you know, if you are using configurations from config server, you can add config client. Otherwise, I don't want. Okay, I'm going to make a simple web application. Bus. Finish it. So application is generating. SMS web. Okay. Application is generated. No code, nothing. So as data JPA we added, data source URL, username, passwords that we should add. Let me add Oracle data source properties. The basic data JPA properties. Let's add them to properties. Done. First basic configuration is done. If it is config server, I need not to bother about configurations. I can give config server or Azure Vault references here, and maybe here instead of hard coding this, they provide the configuration parameters that you can use instead of using static references here. Find server dot port. I want to run it into 9090. Now let me create backend portion. Packages com.rbu.ecom.web. If your web package is not part of this, your classes will not be identified by component scan. So always the child package should be part of this main class package wherever you have at the rate Spring Boot application. Or else by default it will provide component scan. Here we can give package name if it is not a part of this package. Create a webhook. After that, service DAO. And one more package to maintain entity package. If you want to maintain DTOs also, you can maintain DTO package. Entity and DTO will maintain different. The reason, entity will connect with database, whereas DTO will help us to get the data from front end to controller. Front end will populate data into DTOs. In web, that data will carry to service to DAO, and we will put data in the form of entity and we will save it in database. So always system design will start from entity based on your requirements. My requirement is I want to do registration, implementation, a simple registration form. You can apply this for any CRUD operation also. Something if you want to save from your front end. Name, email, address, phone number, pin code, state, country. All this data I want to store into database. Student will submit it and I want to keep it into database. So with that fields, you generate an entity first. Usually we will have table in database. For the table, we will create entity. If table not available, generally while using data JPA, it can also generate tables. Usually we will maintain tables separately in database with all required indexes and all. Sometimes table may have more columns than your entity also based on business requirements. Maybe that is not part of your use case. Still your table can have more columns. Okay. For now we will use table creation. We will create table from application. We will use at the rate entity and mention table name here. Table name student. My database schema system. So every table should have must a primary key long student ID. On top of primary key, you should mention always at the rate ID. And if you want to generate it automatically, you can use at the rate generated value, and you can put here strategy auto. So automatically ID will be generated during in session. Private string name as per requirement. I need a name column, email, address, pin, state, city, font, country. Bus. I need all these properties. Out of all these columns data I'll get from front end and only ID will be generated automatically. When this table and this bean columns naming conventions, if you want to use save, here you need not to mention at the rate column, not required. But you have using or you are using existing table which is having different column name, then you need to mention that name here, column name. Let's say existing table have student name, student email. Then you need to mention at the rate column. Otherwise, not really required. And has every been required at the rate data, because you need to provide setters and getters. So it is mandatory that you need to have at the rate data. So that you need not to provide any setter or getters. One annotation will do everything for you. Now, entity is ready. Whenever I submit this data, whenever I submit this data from front end via Postman or Ajax call, whatever HTTP call you made, via HTTP call, it will come to your Tomcat. So it reads the data, and as a next step, it will send it to dispatcher servlet. It will send this data to dispatcher servlet. It will send your request URL and all everything to dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet, you know architecture. It will ask handler mapping, then handler mapping will suggest controller, then it will go to so and so controller method. So when I implement a controller here, a student controller, dispatcher servlet is a predefined class. You need not to, if it is a Spring Boot, you need not to do any configuration for Tomcat dispatcher servlet. Default Tomcat is available, default dispatcher servlet configuration also available. You need not do anything. Just write your controller, and when you put a method here, like your post method, get method, with your object, required object. Okay, let's say student DTO. When this DTO columns matches with the front end columns, this front end columns, which ever data sending via HTTP. If these columns naming conventions, if they are matching with your DTO, default dispatcher servlet will populate data into DTO. Automatically, it will populate data. So as it is populating it automatically here, and during implementation of backend, usually we need to share this object structure to frontend. Based on your naming conventions only, they will implement frontend part. So as this DTOs, we need to implement first, and we should share which input is required to us. As always, this is exposed to front ends. As always, this is exposed to front ends, right? It is not safe to use entities here. That's why we use DTOs. Entities are having direct connection with the database. Entities are having direct connection with the database. If you provide such entity here, if you provide such entity directly, if you provide data into such entity here without validations and all, there is a chance that from front end SQL injections or bad data might be populated without any checkings. If you put data into entity, or your entity if it having any relationships like many to many, one to one, all that relationships will be exposed to front end also. So that is not really required. Your tables may have complicated, or your tables may have relationships that you need not to really share to front end. That's where, to avoid that problem, you need to create a DTO, a simple DTO which is equivalent to your front end form. So you need a DTO also here, student DTO. data transfer object. Into this object first we will populate data. This is a simple poser class, a bean class. If you want ID also you can keep it, but from front end we are not submitting ID. ID is automatically generated. That is how we decided. Right. I have DTO. Now when I submit data from front end, I need a controller. Student controller as usual at the rate REST controller at the rate request mapping something student. And I can have all HTTP methods here for same. For example, public response entity student to DTO create a student. And I want to populate data into request body of what student to DTO. Whenever you submit data from front end, in this object I want to get the data. When this method you want to execute, that you need to decide here with the post mapping or get mapping. If you don't put any additional URL here, that means this request mapping URL is applicable to this method. Okay. Once you get data here, you should transfer this data to service. So you need a service class. See, this is half implementation. I don't have service class, so I can't implement it. That's why usually I implement from backend to frontend. You implement a DAO here first. You know we need not implement anything. Just interface is enough. Student repository interface is enough. Just we will extend this from JPA repository, correct? And we give our entity plus a primary key data type. Must right? That's it. Of course, these packages we will scan, entity scan and all that stuff we put here. Repository scan, entity scan. When you have repository and entities, we will be scanning them. Did you guys try it without scanning? Enable JPA repositories and entity scan. Yeah. So I'm considering these classes are falling under this child package. It can scan, or else you can give package here com dot rbu dot ecom dot dao package entity scan paste package com dot rbu dot ecom dot entity. So DAO class, I mean interface is ready. You can implement your service class also. Whichever DAO it is implementing during runtime will provide all other operations. So student service at the rate service annotation public student to DTO I want to return after creation of student object. Create student Here also I'll give input student detail. In the beginning we discussed about the runtime polymorphism. If you want to achieve that really, create the student service interface first. Student service interface. No implementation. And implement it here. Student service interface. Here you can auto wire your DAO or repository class. Generally, Sonar will not encourage auto wire. Instead of it suggests to use constructor dependency injection. So just mention your property, whichever you want to auto wire. Student repository. You need not to auto wire. Instead of auto wiring, put all argument constructor. So just if you mention all argument constructor, one constructor will be generated with this repository and automatic dependency injection will be happened without auto wired also. When you have parameterized constructor, automatic dependency injection will happen. This is best way. If you use at the rate auto wired, always Sonar will say remove auto wired and use constructor dependency injection. So I'm using it. And here repository dot save method. If I use, I need to pass student entity, not this DTU. So here let's convert whatever data you are getting in this object to student object. Map data to DTO to entity. For that purpose you can use bean utils copy properties. Source to target. Source to DTO. Target is, let me create a empty object student. Student equal to new student. Maybe you may ask why you are using new keyword here. Nothing wrong here if I use new keyword, because always a new data will come from every new user and this is method level. So nothing wrong if I use something here. Or else if you don't want to use a new keyword approach, still if you want to create a empty object, okay, without using new keyword, you can use builder pattern also. You can add at the rate builder here. That will help you to create object using builder also without new keyword, right? You can use student dot builder dot build. It will generate a object. Pass that object here. Save that object. So here creating empty object. Here we are mapping a data which is coming from user to this entity object. Finally saving it. Done. So once you save, you will be getting a student object again as a return. What is the difference between this object and this object means? While I am giving ID is not available, but after save, when it returns object, right, this will contains ID also. So what you can do, immediately use the same copy utils, map data which is coming from student to, or else small thing, right? Use DTO dot set student ID. In return object you got ID, assign that ID here. Finally, as promised, return DT bus. Now use this interface in your control. Service interface. Use here parameterized constructor. All argue constructor. Call create a student method with your DTO input. End of the day, it will return DTO only to you. What you can do, you can wrap this call into your REST. Go ahead. Yes. Hello. Which is coming from front end. You want to save directly into database. Hmm. What is the difference? Tell me once I got here. In this DTO, I am submitting all this data. Name, email address, all these parameters. Right? I'm sending all this data from there. And populating it into which object? DTO object. And this DTO object data I'm shifting into this object, correct? Here using bean utils, just directly loading DTO data into student. So student object contains which data? Same DTO data, correct? So finally I'm using depository dot save. The student object is saved. Which object it will return? Save method of your Hibernate. Same student object only it will return. Extra one value you will be getting apart from the data which you given complete information, Dikshit address and his details, everything, but system generated one ID for you that is not available pehle. I mean, at first in this object ID is not there. After saving I am overriding my object with return value. Here I got the return value, right? After save I am getting return value here. You want to return that, return to front end you are saying? No, I'm not using units. See here. See, after save and before save, DTO missing only one value. What is that? ID which is generated. Correct? So only that ID, extra ID I am assigning here, which is missing. You only send complete data. You only sending your data completely. After saving, one thing you need to get in return. What is that? Your ID also. So that's why after save, whichever ID is there in the student object, I am assigning it here. And you may ask a question, why you didn't return the student object directly? No, I don't want to return. This is because this is entity. Hmm, correct. But if I do that step, what will happen? Already see, when it reaches to line number 21, okay, before execution of line number 21, what this DTO will contain? Okay, tell me here. Okay. In line number 16, this DTO object contains what data? If I submit something, Dikshit, full details from here. Full details will be available in this DTO or not here? At line number 16, except ID. Correct. Now, in line number 18, I am creating one empty object. So in this object, what data I have? Here, line number 18, student object contains what? Oh, I created only empty object, right? I just created empty object, empty student object only. That is not so good, right? Just okay. I think I completely changed it. Oh my god. Still you able to see it right properly? Which font I was using before? Little better, okay. So when it reaches to this line, no data in this object. So what I am doing using bean copy utils, I am just shifting data which is coming from this object to this object. Now this empty object is filled with the DTO object. Not shifting, actually copying, deep copying. DTO data will copy into student also. So now student object, this DTO object contains same data, no difference. By the line it reaches to 20, this student object and this DTO object both are same data because already you copied that here. Whatever data you have except ID, the same data in student also. Except ID only you are saving it. Once you save it, what you will get extra in the return object? Only that extra ID with your data only. Okay. So extra ID only I have here. Apart from that, remaining data is available in DTO. That's why that extra ID only I am assigning to this DTO instead of copying again everything. That might take obviously some time, right? Comparing with copying one value, the remaining fields also it will copy unnecessarily. Already the same data only I have in the DTO. Why I should copy again? You got it right? Still confusing. Getting right, Dikshit? पूरा data उस yeah. So in DTO also you have complete data except ID. That ID only I'm fetching and adding here. As you said, I can copy again, deep copy from student to DTO also. But the problem is unnecessarily it will take time. That's why only one field I copied. Okay. bus. Okay. Yeah. Now from controller, here I'm calling service directly whichever response coming. I'm wrapping that response into response entity. Response entity is the best way to send the response back instead of direct object and just wrapping it into response entity. Response entity can hold your HTTP status along with your object also. That's the reason. HTTP status code also I can set here. HTTP status is created 201. Bus completed. So this is end-to-end simple controller. Now I want to create web also. I really disturb this font. Earlier it was good. Okay. Okay. So one post mapping is completed. If you want to implement update method, use put mapping. Same code. Instead of post, use put mapping. Update student. Same object you will get. In service interface, you need to add additional update method. If you want to delete, a delete method. Maybe after delete, nothing to return, void is bus. If you have single select, maybe you can use find student by ID. If you want all data, no input required, find all student expecting a list of DTOs. What are all these business methods? Let me go to service, override everything, add unimplemented methods. Same stuff always. Before going to save, copy it first. Copy from DTO to your object and use repository method. I think for both saves should function, right? Use save. Of course, now you need not to even copy this. Just a return DTO as it is. Whichever data you sent, that data only it will hold if everything went fine. Same DTO you can return. And for delete, if everything goes fine, you need not to return anything. Just to get data into student, use delete method. Find one student. Nothing to copy, only ID I'm getting. So set that ID into this bean, set student ID into this bean, empty bean, and use, there are many methods, right? Find by ID. Oh, I need not to give this. Directly ID also I can use. So nothing to build an object. It will straight away return you student object. Okay. So it is giving always in the form of optional. it will help you to avoid null pointer exceptions. You can see if data contains, then only you can do all select operations. Now here, if student is present, if data contains, do the mapping into what? Now this time you need a DTO object, student to DTO you need, but we don't have builder pattern in DTO. Apply builder here as well. So copy data from student to DTO and return it. Bus. If no data, nothing. Return none. The syntax should be fine, right? I think it should be fine. Yeah. Find student. Find all students. So for find all, you will be using repository dot find all, give it to you list of students. This you should convert into DTO. Simple for each approach I'll use. You can use streams also. Use for each. List you will get student. Prepare a DTO list. New array list. DTO list. Add which object? DTO object. But you need to convert it first. So again B Newtons. Same story. Add this DTO here. Finally return DTO list. So all business methods implemented. Go to controller, implement your required methods here. Update student, created, maybe accepted. If you want to delete data, use HTTP delete mapping. Delete student. Yes, that is what I was mentioning. You can put a stream also. Stream.map you can use and convert it. Okay, you want me to try? Yeah. Okay, this. Delete student DTO. Usually I'm not expecting anything, right? So you can mention void. Nothing is expecting here. Okay. Call this separate. When it is void, it's okay. Send it okay. Find one student. Oh, not find. Get mapping with ID. Maybe get the path parameter. Or if you get in the form of complete object also, that's up to you. You can get as a path variable or in request body if you want to get a complete object. Get it. Find student. Let's see. With ID if I get, let me put what we have used to map path parameter, path parameter, path variable. Let's use whatever it is. ID. And we have method find student by ID. If I give ID, it brings response of DT. Get all, use similar get mapping, no param required, just when somebody call get, no data. I want to return list of student details. Find all students. And done. So end-to-end backend is implemented. But here you need to have exception handling. If you have any exceptions, global exception handler you can write. Beyond this, and loggings, other stuff we can put, but this is basic use case. Okay. Now you may test it. Later I'll add front end also. Run it. We are expecting to run this in 9090. Not a merged type. HBM2 DDL auto update. Let's put create. Existing one it may drop and recreates. I will run it in debug mode better. What happened to student entity? com.rb.ecom. Not a managed type student. Defined in Not a managed type student. Well, this entity is not scanned com.rb.ecom.entity. Do you guys see any mistake? Unsatisfied with the bean name, enable JPA repositories. I believe nothing wrong. Something is at entity dot star, maybe. Basically, it is not identifying it. That is what I can see. Or is it expecting array of values? Student repository that could not found. Student entity system schema student table or unique table. Student 2024. Okay. Data builder entity looks fine. Okay. Okay. This time it is running fine. I think sequence does not exist, so it will create a sequence. Table or view does not exist, then it will create a table. first time error only, but you will not see that problem later. I think this application works. Open Postman and create a data, and let's see, is it able to create table in DB and able to store it or not. No, Postman you created. Okay, as we included them, it is considering. So until unless they are your child packages, it is considering. If it go out of that, you need to scan it. You can try that scenario also. Okay. Student. So as he is mentioning, enable repository annotation also not required. If they all are under the main class, root class, child packages. Okay. So let me create some data. Post student name, email address. What fields I have? So pin. And as we need mentioned any annotations for validations, it will accept everything. Okay. If you put at the rate valid annotation on the okay, validations, it may not allow bad data. Okay. So I have data here. Submit it. A post method. I think something executed code here. See the response. I got 201 created and the ID I received is 1. So all that we need to verify is this new schema, new table created in that schema or not. So one record got inserted. You can try other HTTP methods also. If you want to update, use put method. Same ID it will continue. Something pin code. I will change it to 589. Basically select update we can also do, but usually from front end also we'll get the complete data. Okay, during update scenario. Put method 202 accepted. YID null. Oh, I did not submitted any ID. That is problem. Check whether it is updated or not. Not updated actually, it is inserted because we have not given student ID. ID is mandatory for update scenario. Without ID, it will not function. One. Okay. So now record one. Hmm. No, no. I'm doing put operation. Put expects complete object with your ID. During post, as you don't have ID, it's okay. But during update, you should know which ID belongs to. So for put scenario, you should send the ID also. Student ID. Constructor. JPA. No default constructor for entity. What? Entity student. Do I need to mention at the rate? No argument constructor. Application restarted. Table gone. Okay. Let me insert some record first. Without ID. Post method. Save it. Data created. Now with the put method. Update it with ID. We may change name also. Something if you want to make it capital letters. Maybe you can put okay. Accepted and updated. Check it out. It is updated. And you can use delete also. For delete, usually ID is enough, but I think we added a complete object. Hmm. It's okay. Let's give ID is enough to delete, but it is fine. HTTP delete method said OK, which means your data must be deleted. No data found. Gone. Again post it. No ID required. Send it. Record created. Earlier one was consumed, right? So new ID it is using too. And if you want to do select operation, one record. Get method with the path variable. The ID is true. Null. given ID 2. Did we use the path param, right? Again, table will path variable was correct. No, 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 no. Let's see again. Post method. We have data. Save it. Data created. So you got the data here. Now if you want to get that data, localhost slash student slash id1. If I pass, I should able to get it. Invalid data access API usage. The given ID must not be null. Oh, it is expecting path variable, not variable, right? Path parameter. Path parameter. But why it did not work? That is the concern. Data created, get operation, ID is 1, simple get. Uh, Maybe if I debug, then I can see. What is the mistake? ID passing here. I'm doing it in a right way only, right? Mapping data. Maybe let's debug and check. Post it, save. What? Data saved. Forget the call student cursor coming. So value 1 I am getting here. So till here it is fine. Here also value 1 is there. Find by ID in the repository also I'm calling. The call came here. Option of student getting all the data also. This is also fine. He is present. He is present also success. One empty DTO created. Using copy properties, I am trying to copy. This is source, right? Copy properties method. Source to target. This is my source. This is my target. Source to target. Finally, target written. Okay. Next line. When I reach next line, oh, why this is not working? Acha. You guys can guess, right? This is optional object. Optional doesn't have anything. From optional, you need to get it. Yeah. Same mistake I did before. Okay. Now it will function. Save. Not restarted. Let me finish. Save. Get. We will be getting it. Okay. Cursor the waiting in debug. Finish, finish, finish. We got the data. Yeah. So tomorrow I'll show you with the front end also. Okay. I'll create with the jQuery basic Ajax calls we will implement and we'll do end-to-end cloud operations. That we'll see tomorrow.